You're getting good marks for your practice AQA GCSE English Language questions, but not full marks. Perhaps you feel you're pretty good at exploring language in the exam, but a bit more hazy when it comes to structure. This video will include some very specific tips on how to answer this question, as well as include a model response from a past paper. So let's increase your chances of getting full marks for question 3 from paper 1. Stay tuned and watch Schofield on Shakespeare.
Please tell me you've memorised the mark scheme. Here's how the top 3 levels look. So to get full marks, you need to be perceptive and detailed. Make some intelligent comment about how and why a piece has been structured. But what exactly are structural features? And is it very much the case that GCSE pupils are much more comfortable writing about language as opposed to structure? Well, when writing about structure, you should be using some of the terms and phrases on screen now. Press pause if you would like to write these down. The video will resume in 5 seconds time. So how might some of these terms be used within a response, exploring the structure of a passage? Well, why don't we dive straight into one of my favourite books, Mary Elizabeth Braddon's tremendously exciting Lady Audley's Secret, to do some modelling. Just to explain the background, he is Robert Audley, Sir Michael Audley's nephew. He has found out that his uncle Sir Michael has married bigamously. In this extract, Robert forces Sir Michael's bigamous wife, Lady Audley, to tell her husband the truth about her past. He met Sir Michael in the hall. He made no attempt to prepare the way for the terrible revelation which the baronet was to hear. He only drew him into the firelit library, and there for the first time addressed him quietly thus. "Lady Audley has a confession to make to you, sir. A confession which I know will be a most cruel surprise, a most bitter grief. But it is necessary for your present honour and for your future peace that you should hear it. She has deceived you, I regret to say, most basely. But it is only right that you should hear from her own lips any excuses which she may have to offer for her wickedness. May God soften this blow for you," sobbed the young man, suddenly breaking down. "I cannot." Sir Michael lifted his hand as if he would command his nephew to be silent, but that imperious hand dropped feeble and impotent at his side. He stood in the centre of the firelit room, rigid and immovable. "Lucy," he cried in a voice whose anguish struck like a blow upon the jarred nerves of those who heard it, as the cry of a wounded animal pains the listener. "Lucy, tell me that this man is a madman. Tell me so, my love, or I shall kill him." There was a sudden fury in his voice as he turned upon Robert, as if he could indeed have felled his wife's accuser to the earth with the strength of his uplifted arm. But my lady fell upon her knees at his feet, interposing herself between the baronet and his nephew, who stood leaning on the back of an easy-chair, with his face hidden by his hand. "He has told you the truth," said my lady. Now for a paper 1, question 3 style question. How does Braddon use structure to build up excitement in this passage? Spend some time thinking about this, referring back to your previous notes on useful terminology when writing about structure. The second part of the extract will reappear on screen in 5 seconds' time, so press pause to ponder. Here are some thoughts. Note the shift from narrative to dialogue. The first 3 sentences describe not just Robert Audley's movements, but also allude to a terrible revelation which Sir Michael is going to hear. Note that he is not told this immediately, and suspense is built up as we wonder how the old man is going to react to such extraordinary news as his wife being a bigamist. Also notice how Robert Audley within his speech just says that Lady Audley has a confession to make. He doesn't say what that confession is about, but he does allude to the devastating effect it is going to have on his uncle. So this speech is structured to delay a crucial piece of information, something which further builds up tension and excitement. Notice how the narrative focus switches back from dialogue to description. We as readers continue to have to wait to hear the effects of Lady Audley's confession on her husband. Tension is built through the description of Sir Michael's preliminary feelings of shock. If his imperious hand is already feeble and impotent, imagine how he will react when he actually knows what has happened. Note the structure of the first paragraph within this section. Sir Michael Audley's speech is split up into two parts to give the writer the opportunity to describe the pain of his voice before hearing his reaction in full. And then we have two further paragraphs which describe dramatic physical desires and reactions, before in the final paragraph of the extract, Lady Audley speaks out. But of course in the exam you would need to produce more than annotations, however useful this exercise may be. Here's how a written response might look. How does Brannan use structure to build up excitement in this passage? The persistent shifts in narrative focus between description and dialogue help delay the climactic moment in which Lady Audley confirms that Robert Audley's accusations are true, and thus result in a slow, exciting build-up of tension. For instance, the writer includes a description of Sir Michael's physical reaction to his nephew's emotional speech within a single paragraph deliberately positioned prior to his verbal response. This means that the reader needs to wait to hear the details of his almost certainly anguished reaction. However, even when we do get to hear Sir Michael's speech, we are only given the first word Lucy. The writer includes another piece of description before continuing the utterance. The interposed description not only confirms Sir Michael's angst in far more detail than is implied by the single word exclamatory sentence, but makes the reader wait to hear for his impassioned words. The overall effect is to build up tension. So hopefully that gives you an idea about what is required. Now let's look at an actual past paper extract and question. You now need to think about the whole of the source box. This text is from the middle of a short story. How has the writer structured the text to interest you as a reader? You could write about what the writer focuses your attention on at the beginning of the source, how and why the writer changes this focus as the source develops, any other structural features that interest you. So before the extract, the background. Using a time machine, an organisation called Time Safari transports clients into the past to take part in hunting expeditions. A group that includes Mr. Eccles, together with their guide Travis, is visiting a prehistoric jungle in order to shoot a Tyrannosaurus Rex. The jungle was high and the jungle was broad. Sounds like music and flying tents filled the sky, and those were pterodactyls soaring with huge grey wings. I've hunted tiger, wild boar, buffalo, elephant, but now this is it, said Eccles. I'm shaking like a kid. Ah, said Travis. Everyone stopped. Travis raised his hand. Ahead, he whispered. In the mist. There he is. There's his royal majesty now. The jungle was wide and full of twitterings, rustlings, murmurs, and sighs. Suddenly it all ceased, as if someone had shut a door. Silence, a sound of thunder. Out of the mist, 100 yards away, came Tyrannosaurus Rex. It, whispered Eccles. It. Shh! came on great oiled, resilient, striding legs. It towered 30 feet above half of the trees, a great evil god, folding its delicate watchmaker's claws close to its oily reptilian chest. Each lower leg was a piston, 1,000 pounds of white bone, sunk in thick ropes of muscle, sheathed over in a gleam of pebbled skin like the armour of a terrible warrior. Each thigh was a ton of meat, ivory and steel mesh. And from the great breathing cage of the upper body, those two delicate arms dangled out front, arms with hands which might pick up and examine men like toys, while the snake neck coiled, and the head itself, a ton of sculptured stone, lifted easily upon the sky. Its mouth gaped, exposing offensive teeth like daggers. Its eyes rolled, ostrich eggs, empty of all expression save hunger. It closed its mouth in a death grin. It ran its pelvic bones, crushing aside trees and bushes, its taloned feet clawing damp earth, leaving prints 6 inches deep wherever it settled its weight. It ran with a gliding ballet step far too poised and balanced for its 10 tons. It moved into a sunlit area warily, its beautifully reptilian hands feeling the air. Why? Eccles twitched his mouth. It could reach up and grab the moon. Shh! Travis jerked angrily. He hasn't seen us yet. It can't be killed. Eccles pronounced his verdict quietly, as if there could be no argument. He had weighed the evidence, and this was his considered opinion. The rifle in his hand seemed like a toy gun. We were fools to come. This is impossible. Shut up, hissed Travis. Nightmare. Turn around, commanded Travis. Walk quietly to the machine. We'll remit half your fee. I didn't realise it would be this big, said Eccles. I miscalculated, that's all, and now I want out. It sees us. There's the red paint on its chest. The tyrant lizard raised itself. Its armoured flesh glittered like 1,000 green coins. The coins, crusted with slime, steamed. In the slime, tiny insects wriggled, so that the entire body seemed to twitch and undulate, even while the monster itself did not move. It exhaled. The stink of raw flesh blew down the wilderness. Get me out of here, said Eccles. It was never like this before. I was always sure I'd come through alive. I'd good guides, good safaris and safety. This time, I figured wrong. I've met my match and admit it. This is too much for me to get hold of. Don't run, said L'Esperance. Turn around. Hide in the machine. Yes, Eccles seemed to be numb. He looked at his feet as if trying to make them move. He gave a grunt of helplessness. Eccles! He took a few steps, blinking, shuffling. Not that way! The monster at the first motion lunged forward with a terrible scream. It covered 100 yards in 6 seconds. The rifles jerked up and blazed fire. A windstorm from the beast's mouth engulfed them in the stench of slime and old blood. The monster roared, teeth glittering with sun. The rifles cracked again, but their sound was lost in shriek and lizard thunder. The great level of the reptile's tail swung up, lashed sideways. Trees exploded in clouds of leaf and branch. The monster twitched its jeweler's hands down to fondle at the men, to twist them in half, to crush them like berries, to cram them into its teeth and its screaming throat. Its boulder stone eyes levelled with the men. They saw themselves mirrored. They fired at the metallic eyelids and the blazing black iris. Like a stone idol, like a mountain avalanche, Tyrannosaurus fell. So, how has the writer structured the text to interest you as a reader? Well, my suggestion is always to think and annotate before launching forth into your response. Even for questions like this, for which there is a relatively small amount of marks available, just 8. Before having a go at your own response, you might like to see my annotations. Note at the beginning the dramatic shift from cinematic view to dialogue. The writer very briefly gives us a sense of the size, grandeur and time period of the jungle before launching into dialogue. This rapid shift adds variety and quickly shows us the human position in relation to this strange world. Note also the use of dramatic, very short paragraphs for effect, including one with just one word, silence. This helps build up a tense mood, in which the reader expects something exciting or dangerous to happen. Sure enough, it does. A Tyrannosaurus Rex pitches up. But note how the final sentence on screen now is structured. In a majority of sentences, the subject will be positioned at the beginning. However, here, the subject, the Tyrannosaurus Rex, is positioned as the final words of the sentence. The effect of this is that excitement builds up through the sentence before we finally learn that the most terrifying, dangerous dinosaur is indeed approaching. And notice the extraordinary change in paragraph lengths. From single sentence paragraphs, we move to a much longer paragraph in which the narrative focus has shifted from dialogue to describing the dinosaur in very close detail. Following this description of the dinosaur, the narrative focus switches back to dialogue and the nervous, panicked comments and reactions from the human beings. This switching between detailed description of the dinosaur and panicked utterances continues with the section shown on screen now. Before we move to a climax in which the humans end up shooting at the animal. Within the final sentence, note once again the way the subject is delayed. We have to wade through two dramatic similes before learning the T-Rex's fate. Hopefully that's given you some ideas. Time now to write your own response. In the exam booklet, you are given 2 single sides of A4 to complete the response, for which 8 marks are available. It can be tricky to estimate timings for individual sections, but it's worth noting that you have 1 hour and 45 minutes for the full exam, and there are a total of 80 marks available. Mathematically speaking then, which is a crude measure, you would expect to spend no more than 12 minutes on this. Get cracking. The extracts will appear on screen within 5-second intervals.
How did you get on? Managed to write something intelligent? Were you concise with your phrasing and perceptive and detailed with what you wrote? Here's my response.
The passage begins with a cinematic view of the jungle, so that the reader has an overview of its enormous size and the fact that it is populated by dinosaurs. However, this paragraph is very brief, and the writer engages the reader by switching almost immediately to quick-fire dialogue, in which the characters increasingly reveal their feelings of fear. During this opening, it is notable just how short both the sentences and the paragraphs are. Silence, a sound of thunder. The effect of this is to build up tension. It is clear that at some point the human beings are going to find themselves in considerable danger. The one-word paragraph, silence, is particularly effective as it reflects what the humans are doing. They are waiting and listening in silence. The structure changes with the appearance of the Tyrannosaurus Rex. Further tension is built up in the sentence in which he appears for the first time. Out of the mist, 100 yards away, came Tyrannosaurus Rex. The subject of the sentence, i.e. the dinosaur, has deliberately been positioned at the very end of the sentence, so that the reader has to wait to find out that such a dangerous predator is approaching. It's also worth pointing out that the writer has omitted either a definite the or an indefinite a article, which makes the dinosaur seem all the more unique and overwhelming. However, following his appearance, the narrative focus switches from dialogue and description within very short paragraphs to a much longer paragraph containing very detailed description of the dinosaur. From the cinematic view of the first paragraph, we move to an extreme close-up so that the power and horror of the predator can be seen in tiny detail. In the latter stages of the text, the writer continues to switch the narrative focus from panicking dialogue to detailed description of the dinosaur. Following the dinosaur's scream, the writer returns to using short, frequently simple sentences: the monster at the first, and it covered 100 yards in 6 seconds, in order to highlight the rapid speed of the battle between the dinosaur and the hunters. In the final sentence of the extract, the writer once again uses the technique of delaying the subject until the end of the sentence. 2 consecutive similes are used before we find out that Tyrannosaurus fell, which helps build up further excitement and interest. How does this response meet the criteria in the mark scheme? Well, crucially, I don't just name the structural features, I analyse their effects, as I do here when I explore why the writer has used incredibly short sentences and paragraphs. I also select a range of judicious, wise, carefully chosen examples when I quote silence, a sound of thunder. Remember, shorter examples are invariably better, fewer words wasted copying. And of course, you need to use technical terminology accurately. I do this when referring to the structural techniques of narrative focus and simple sentences, but also when I reference the language technique of a simile. Remember also that the examiner is given some indicative content, some suggested points that a candidate might make to help them with their marking. They don't claim to be model answers or complete, but just to provide an exemplification of the type of analysis a candidate in each band might provide. If you're interested, read through the indicative standard from the mark scheme for level 4, which is of course the top band. And finally, exam boards provide a report summarising what candidates did well and what they struggled with for each question. Here are some selected comments which you may find helpful. Read them as they appear on screen.
So, what is required in order to get the full 8 marks in question 3 from paper 1? Well, examiners are looking for detailed and perceptive insight into structural devices. Don't just retell the plot in your own words. They're looking for subject terminology to be used accurately and for wisely chosen quotations to be embedded seamlessly. Good luck with it all, and many thanks for watching Schofield on Shakespeare.